Everybody, my name is Catie Osborn, and I am a mental health educator and advocate. I do a lot of stuff online, and I have been asked to come speak with you all today, and I'm honored to be here. And so I'm going to begin with a poem. It's called The Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things. The first time I heard this poem, I rolled my eyes. In all honesty, the first 10 times I heard it, I rolled my eyes. How trite, I thought. Stupid birds and pretentious landscapes. Cool, I'm bored. Remember the stupid birds. They become important later on. For any of this to make sense, I need to contextualize a little bit about myself. And for this particular conversation, you need to know that I am what I like to call a recovering, burnt out, gifted, and talented kid. I spent the better part of my academic career all the way through grad school, just wildly succeeding, being good at everything I tried, being lauded and praised for my accomplishments and my achievements. Poor me, right? However, I also spent those years living with undiagnosed depression and ADHD, which meant that I constantly led this secret double life where at school, at work, in public, I was fine. I was more than fine. I was usually the person people looked at as this model of success, this model of achievement, but I couldn't keep my room clean. I'd lose things. I'd forget things. I'd come home from playing Hamlet to a bedroom I couldn't walk in because I couldn't muster the energy to do the laundry. I'd have meltdowns over the dirty dishes that I'd have to move off of chairs to get my A+ homework done. And I thought, what is wrong with me? What is so broken about me that everyone else around me can have their stuff together, but here I am. I have 2 freaking master's degrees and I'm playing Hamlet, but I can't load my own dishwasher. I must be broken. I must be a failure. And I internalized that. And I entered into this cycle where I'd strive for absolute perfection in all things, only to burn myself out, which would result in mistakes or mishaps or what have you, but which would just result in just affirming the same idea that I'd started with, that I was a failure, that I was a burden, that I wasn't enough. And so I doubled down. I doubled down on trying to be the most perfect, and the cycle would repeat itself. It was exhausting. And so I just quietly shove all of that deep, deep down and ignore it because I didn't want to address it. I didn't want to admit it. I didn't want to be a bother. And that's a real thing. I have always been a very independent person. I am loath to ask for help. I despise admitting weakness. And true story, I have almost died twice because I didn't want to bother anybody at the hospital. I am not good at not being okay. Funny thing about not being okay. This past year, I think we can all agree, has been a year that hung on just a razor's edge of being okay and fine and coping and being profoundly not okay. And for me in particular, I found myself in a very odd set of circumstances. I have worked in theater and the performing arts for over a decade. It is the thing that I wholesale devoted my life to. And then in less than a week, everything I ever knew, everything I had planned and anticipated and worked for and hoped for just disappeared. An entire industry disappeared overnight. My friends lost their jobs, lost their livelihoods. I got call after call from friend after friend panicking about burning through their life savings, losing everything. Despair. but not in the way that any of us had ever experienced. It was terrifying. Suddenly, I had no anchor. I had no plan, absolutely no idea what I was supposed to do with any of this. And so I did what any good elder millennial does in a time of crisis. I turned to social media. And and it was surreal because the same friends who I knew were experiencing homelessness, the same friends who'd spend hours crying with me on the phone about their life savings drying up, would post these shiny, happy pictures of themselves, hashtag blessed, hashtag stop the spread. And I thought, but despair. I've seen yours. I know yours. And yet we are all so scared to show ours publicly, to admit that we're struggling, to admit that fear, to admit that uncertainty. And for what? Because we might wind up with a few less likes than yesterday. But even more than that, I felt like a failure. I knew the people around me were struggling and hurting and going through these really hard things, but here I was in my comfy house being sad because I didn't get to play Hamlet anymore. Oh. So I did the next best thing to Shakespeare. I started making TikToks, which I cannot stress enough was never the plan. I told myself for years that I couldn't possibly be a content creator because of 1,000 stupid reasons. I wasn't funny in the right way. I wasn't pretty in the right way. I was too fat. I was too old. I was too mentally ill. I wasn't relevant. I didn't have anything to say, but I needed something to do. I needed something to hang on to. And so I started talking about my struggles with being the aforementioned burnt out gifted kid, about living with depression and my struggles with late diagnosis ADHD. And suddenly people started noticing. They started listening, first by the dozens, then by the thousands, then the 100,000s, and then the 500,000. And I realized that in the midst of this, there is a need for this kind of conversation, especially for people like me, people who are loath to ask for help, but who struggle in secret. The people who have spent a lifetime burning themselves out, never feeling like they're good enough, striving for perfection, internalizing every failure and every struggle as a moral failing, being constantly exhausted by this toxic idea that we are, by the very nature of our imperfect existence, not enough. Remember what I said earlier about the stupid birds? So in the poem, Mary Oliver says, "Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine." And the people who had joined this conversation with me did. Over and over, first by the dozens, then the hundreds, then the thousands, I'd get messages and emails and letters and cards from people saying the same thing. No one has ever told me that it is okay to fail. Nobody has ever told me that it's okay to struggle. No one has ever told me that I'm not a bad person for not being able to do the things that seem to come so easily to someone else. And I thought, cool, but I'm just some nerd on the internet who knows how to word good. It's not like I'm special. So one day, for whatever reason, call it whatever you like, God or fate or the universe, I heard that stupid poem about the birds again. But this time it was read to me, for me, by someone I loved very much. Someone who had spent the better part of a year trying to break down my defenses and get to know me, the authentic me who had, in this specific example, traveled literally hundreds of miles to do so. And so, for whatever reason, on that day, I listened. And suddenly, out of nowhere, this poem had the audacity to smack me in the face with this inconvenient truth that I've been pushing aside for far longer than just that year. 5, 10, a decade, I don't know. The fact was, I was filled with despair, and I had been for years. I was filled with self-doubt. I was filled with this feeling of constantly and forever being a failure, being less than, being lonely, feeling placeless. And then suddenly, here I was in this incredibly weird position of being that someone that literally hundreds of thousands of people look to for guidance and advice. And I still felt, at the end of the day, like I was never going to be good enough, that I was a fake and a failure, and most importantly, that I didn't deserve any of this. Here I was talking openly and honestly about my struggles with mental illness and neurodivergency for the first time, but I still couldn't keep my house clean. I still couldn't find the motivation to fold my laundry. I still lost my keys. I still struggled and failed. And I assuredly wasn't perfect. And then, in that profound moment of listening, I actually heard the first line: "You do not have to be good." And I thought, what if that's true? What if maybe I don't have to be good or perfect or exactly the thing that I've convinced myself that I need to be perfectly happy? Maybe, just maybe, I am enough as I am. Maybe what I have to offer this world are my imperfections and my struggles, and how darn hard it is for me to remember to shower sometimes. Maybe that offering of my despair is enough. Maybe the sharing of my struggle is enough. The act of starting that conversation is enough. And so I went from being vaguely annoyed about a poem about pretentious, stupid birds to having some of that poem permanently tattooed on my arm as a remember that I do not need to be perfect. I do not have to crawl on my knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. I can love what I love imperfectly. And I would invite you, all of you who are sharing this space here with me today, to do the same. You do not have to be good. Listen, you do not have to be good. Your struggles, your failures, your difficulties, your challenges, they are all part of the sum total of who you are. And who you are by virtue of your existence is extraordinary. Every person has something to offer the world: unique gifts, unique outlooks, unique perspectives, unique struggles. And that expectation and that pressure we put on ourselves to do it perfectly and precisely, the internalization that our failures define us, that we are inherently broken because we struggle. You do not have to be good. Living authentically, living honestly, living in conversation with who you are and what you have to give right now in this moment. That is what you have already brought by the very virtue, again, of your existence into the family of things. That is how we uplift each other and support each other and build a community that thrives in the challenges, that thrives in the bravery of boldly offering ourselves to the world, imperfections and all. Forgive yourself. If you take one single lesson away from my ADHD ramblings today, it is that you have the power to forgive yourself for what you very well may perceive to be moral failings, things that you feel make you inherently broken and flawed. But I'm here today to remind you that you are not a bad person because you struggle to do the dishes. You are not intrinsically broken because you might be disorganized or run a little late. You are worthy of love as you are, in all of your flaws, in all of your failings. You are worthy of love. You do not have to be good. Even if you cannot, right now, in this moment, love all of yourself, love all of your faults and your failings, accepting love, accepting the love that offers itself to you as a member of the family of things. That is a place to begin. You do not have to be good. There may be days where you cannot do the laundry, or you cannot find your keys, or you forget to call your mom. Give yourself permission to fail. Give yourself permission to be imperfect in your struggle, imperfect in your solutions, perfect only in the attempt to learn to forgive yourself, and embrace that. Embrace the opportunities you find to learn and grow and struggle, because whoever you are, no matter how lonely, no matter how imperfect, the world offers itself to your imagination. So today, I challenge you to announce yourself unapologetically, without shame, without guilt, with absolute forgiveness into the family of things.